America just dropped the most powerful bunker busting bombs we've ever used in combat deep inside Iran's nuclear sites. The question is, though, is this just another Iraq? Or did Trump forget his campaign promises and everything he ran on about being anti-war? Well, let's jump in and find out together. Well, welcome to Filibusted. We are going to dive in today, and I think you guys are going to really like this. I'm going to go quick and just give a quick overview. I think everybody knows what's going on with Iran, and but just to summarize it, I'll go into that quick. And then we've got a few special segments here. I'm going to give a Forever War scorecard, and we're going to go through some of the developments that have happened over in the Middle East in the past decades. And we're going to talk about the war playbook and whether Trump is following that war playbook, the Forever War playbook, really. And I have a special segment called Who Wore It Better? And that's going to be comparing some of the legacy quotes from the DC political theater. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. So awesome. Let's just give a real quick review of what actually happened. So Trump launched this surprise one-night strike on Iran's nuclear facilities using B-2 stealth bombers and 30,000-pound bunker busting bombs. And so this is the first time this weapon has actually been used in combat. And so that operation was called Midnight Hammer. And it targeted strikes at Fordow, Nantes, and Isfahan and Isfahan, and with nearly 75 munitions. While Trump claimed total success, there's conflicting intelligence sources saying it may have just delayed the program, but it definitely marks a major shift for when we talk about prolonged war or decisive deterrence and that sort of thing. So I don't know if you guys have any comments you want to start out with before I jump in, but I want to go into some of Trump's quotes, and then we're going to do some examining and find out whether or not this is just another endless war that's going to be coming or what's really different here. But what are your guys' initial thoughts on this?
If I could hop in on one thing I thought was kind of interesting, this is just a purely like political authority technicality. I had to look this up because I was hearing some different viewpoints about it, but essentially was like, wait a second, we've had a sort of a history of like attacking terrorists and going after terrorists in different countries. Like, I'm sure we'll get into that soon. But this was very different. This was the United States. And I'm not a big fan of Iran, and I know that they're like the number one funder of terrorism. But this is the United States going and dropping bombs on a sovereign nation that we have not had. We haven't been shooting at. We don't have a declaration of war from Congress, that sort of thing. And so I kind of had to look it up and look into it. And I did think it was kind of interesting. Essentially, what we're running on right now is the assumption, and we've had. Well, I say assumption. We actually, there is a law. I think it was passed in like the 1970s. That talks about the president being able to essentially kind of do whatever they want if they feel like the safety of the United States is threatened, but they only have 30 days to do so before their continued military action has to be approved by Congress. And so normally I would say, oh, that's kind of interesting. He has like a 30-day timeline before Congress has to step in and approve and say, okay, should we really be continuing this military action against Iran? Are we going to make a formal declaration of war, or are we just going to say, no, this is just a secluded military action? But either way, you still need Congress to step in and say, like, you can continue doing this, or else he'll have to begin backing out within 30 days and be completely backed out within 60. Now, this is a little different because he didn't deploy any troops. All he did was run and drop bombs. So we're already done. 30, there's no more action unless there's going to be more action. The action is already over. And so from everything that I could tell, Trump definitely had authority to do this, both by the Constitution and by later laws that have been passed. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Go ahead, Ryan. Well, I was just going to, Troy, I think that's such a great point. I'm glad you started off with that because it's even interesting when we see some of the actions, some of the criticisms coming from the left on this, where if you look back and see when some like Libya and Syria and some of these other things, the left, I mean, they weren't criticizing what the president was doing at that time. So they seem to be selective in their memory there.
Yeah, I want to address one thing. I was planning on saving this for later because it's a lot of info, and I'm kind of throwing you off track now, Ryan, but we can go right back into it. But I want to address one thing that Reese has already said, because we've had comments on the channel this week where people said, where are the receipts? Can you actually prove that Iran is funding terrorism? And Where's the evidence for that? And isn't the U.S. funding just as much terrorism? Those kind of things. And I'm like, gosh, I didn't think we were going to have to bring links and sources for that information because it's so publicly available. But I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, just so we have something we can point to on this channel. The link, I'm going to add some links to the description of this video below after the fact. But when it comes to Iran funding terrorism, and I think this brings some justification to some of the actions we've taken so far, like Trump coming in, dropping the bombs on the nuclear enrichment sites. So obviously, the United States Department, or the U.S. State Department, has designated Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism since 1984. You can believe that or not, I guess. But if you just go and look at there's State Department reports, there's congressional hearings, there's international sanctions record reports that have detailed accounts of all of the terrorist activities. It's well documented, not just by the United States, but also by European and Middle Eastern authorities as well. So this is across the board. It's not just the U.S. that has designated them as a state sponsor of terrorism. I want to go through a few of the details, and these are going to be in the links below after the fact. So this is for anybody that has that question in their mind. Should we even be anti-Iran having nuclear weapons at all? Hezbollah. Iran provides arms, training, and funding to Hezbollah, and the United States estimates that Iran funneled about $700 million to Hezbollah in 2020 alone. $700 million. Dang. Hezbollah's leader has publicly acknowledged receiving support from Iran since 1982. So the leader said, "Yep, they've been sending us money. We're getting it. We're getting that check every month in the mail." Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The U.S. reports over $100 million annually in support to these groups, and these groups have been linked to the attacks in Gaza, the West Bank, and the Hamas leader has confirmed. And this is old news back in 2017, but still, if it's been confirmed by both sides, and then it's very, very believable. And they confirmed in 2017 that Iran is one of their major supporters. Houthi militants in Yemen. Iran supplies weapons, including advanced drones, missiles, and more to Houthi rebels who have conducted attacks on regional targets like Saudi Arabia. So they're not just supplying, weapons and training and money to groups that are attacking Israel or something like that. They're supplying weapons and money to all sorts of terrorist organizations and groups in the Middle East that are attacking a bunch of different nations. Like they are disrupting just the sovereignty of all the nations around them, the peace in the Middle East. Iraqi militias, they also backed Iraqi militias. And these are groups responsible for attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq in 2021, as recent as 2021. They have Al-Qaeda ties. Iran has allowed Al-Qaeda facilitators to operate a pipeline through its territory since at least 2009. And this is even though they have different ideologies and beliefs than Al-Qaeda, and they clash heads when it comes to what they actually believe, but they don't care. They're like, Al-Qaeda, y'all are creating terrorism in the world. Great, we're going to fund you. We're gonna link arms with you, and this has enabled Al Qaeda movements and conflicts in South Asia and Syria. And the U.S. has claimed that Iran harbors senior Al Qaeda members as well. Direct terrorist plots. So Iran has been implicated in many terrorist plots. I'm just going to name a few. There was a 2018 attempt to bomb a political rally in France that was pointed back to them. A 2021 plot against an Israeli embassy in East Africa that they were responsible for. A 2018 assassination attempt in Denmark, and a bunch more. So I just named a few small terrorist plots. This is not normal democracy, normal peaceful, negotiations or foreign affairs or whatever. This is terrorism on the world stage. Most of this comes through the IRGC, which is their primary mechanism for supporting these groups. They essentially use it to create proxy wars or proxy conflict so that they can maintain deniability while destabilizing the regions around them. The Justice Department has also linked Iran's oil trafficking to funding the IRGC's funding terrorist activities, and with seizures of 108 million in illicit funds in just 2024. So they're stealing money to fund terrorism, and they're doing it left and right. And some people would say, well, but terrorism can be subjective, right? But it's like, if you actually do the research and you look at all of these reports that have come out, and you think that this is not terrorism, then you need to get your eyes checked. And then after that, you need to go get your heart checked because something's seriously wrong. It's terrorism across the board. And it's not just against Israel. It's not just against one side. It's against almost everybody, except for the people that are doing the terrorist activities. And so I'm going to put those links below. I'm going to stop there, Ryan, and let you move forward. But I wanted to, since we're talking about it today, Reese has already said that the words, like Iran's the biggest state funder of terrorism. I'm going to go ahead and leave those receipts there, and we can point back to this in the future if we need to.
Fantastic. I think it's such a good precursor to what we're going to talk about, because people on the left and maybe people even on the right that don't really understand some of these details can look at this and find a false equivalency, or a false dichotomy where they're trying to say it's the same thing here because this is a moral issue or not a moral issue. And then whether it's just a framing or whether it's actually the thing. And so I'm going to get into the war playbook. It's trademark pending, but we're going to go into that, and we're going to see some serious contrast here for what's been happening and also what Trump has done. But thank you for that. I think that's very important. I don't know, Doug, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that pretty well covered it so far. I'm curious to see what you have to say.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's dive into Trump's anti-war and no endless war quotes. So I just want to give a few of them here. So in his campaign in 2016, this was a major draw for people who were coming to Trump. I mean, this is a major thing that what we liked about Trump is it wasn't these forever wars. He was really against it. He's been talking about it even before he ran for president. And so the fact that he took this means that this step with Iran means, okay, let's pause and really examine it and take a look at this. Is he just another politician, or is he actually doing something that's still in alignment with everything that he has said? So let's see some of these quotes. So in 2016, his 2016 campaign, he says, we have spent $6 trillion in the Middle East, and what do we have to show for it? Death, destruction, and tremendous financial loss. So that was at a campaign rally in 2016. He says also in February 2016, I was against the Iraq war from the beginning. It destabilized the Middle East and gave rise to ISIS. And at the 2016 GOP convention speech, he says, I will never send our finest into battle unless absolutely necessary. If we do, we go in to win. Okay, now in his presidency, 2017 to 2021, he says, great nations do not fight endless wars. That was in his State of the Union address in February 2019. Great nations do not fight endless wars. Press conference, January 2019, I don't want to be the policeman of the world. So that's a pretty big one. Let's see, October 2019, announcing withdrawal. He says, we are getting out of Syria. Let someone else fight over this long bloodstained sand. Okay. Now, in his inaugural address on January 20th, 2017, he says, our goal is not to go abroad and impose our way of life, but to build a better future at home. So again, his inaugural address. And on a Fox News interview in January 2020, he said, we should have never been in the Middle East. We should have never been there. It was a terrible decision. So speaking pretty clearly on his thoughts here about the Middle East. Now, in 2024, 2025, he says, under my leadership, we will rebuild our military. We will use it only when absolutely necessary and quickly. That was in a rally in 2024. He says, no more endless wars. If I go in, it's going to be fast, decisive, and over. So that was in January 2024 at a campaign stop. And then he says, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. That's a promise. And that was a CPAC speech in 2023. So what do you guys think about that? Is he pretty ambiguous on what he says, or what do you guys think about those quotes?
I have a good analogy for you. Did you want to say something?
Go, Doug.
Okay. So the way that I'm kind of seeing this, I'm going to oversimplify this, but here's the way that I'm seeing it right now. Imagine like as you as a parent, you have your two kids, right? And you had the one kid is typically the one who's like causing more trouble. The other one's kind of more of a peacemaker. And then they have this toy that they both like. And the one who's the troublemaker constantly takes the toy and hits the other one over the head with it. But the other one still wants that toy, right? And the other one kind of has shown that they can handle it a little bit better. And you as a parent finally step in and say, okay, I'm going to take this toy away from you. That's kind of what I feel like Trump just did with just bombing the nuclear site in Iran. Like, okay, you don't get your toys anymore. All done.
You forgot the word mine. That usually comes into the picture.
Yeah,
I know from all the little kids I have in my house. That's mine. Okay, yeah, no, I think that's a good illustration. I think
really
my thought,
oversimplifying, but that's
my
kind of what
first,
it feels like.
what?
I just said really oversimplifying, but that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah. My first thought is people are saying, well, Trump's going back on his no war promise, but it's like you just mentioned a campaign promise where he said Iran will never have nuclear weapons. So if he's upholding one campaign promise, then it's like he's not going back on his campaign promises, but it's just a subtle way of actually doing what he said he was going to do. So
yeah, and I think this is a way of showing, because there's lots of like politicians that we see that make promises that are not really even in reality. Like if you actually look at what they can do, and they're conflicting and this and that sort of thing, it's like you can't execute all those promises at the same time. And so it's like when we look at the Bible, and I'm not comparing Trump says to the Bible at all, so don't misquote me on that. But when we look at the Bible, if you see things that seem to be inconsistent, but if you dive a little deeper, it's like, oh, that's just on the surface. If you actually dive deeper and understand the history and the context and the audience and all that, there is no contradiction. And so it's the same thing, is if we really believe what we're saying, there shouldn't be contradiction. You should be able to bring these concepts together. And I think that's what we're going to demonstrate here. That's the case.
That's a great point. That's what I wanted to say was, at first glance, you would think, I would see somebody thinking that what Trump has said is conflicting, to be like, wait, he just said that we're not going to allow Iran to have any nuclear weapons, but he also said that like essentially all of our conflict in the Middle East has been like a waste of money. But if you could connect all those things together, he mainly was talking about endless wars, the forever wars, and then also about specific targets of, like he said, if we do anything, we're going to do it to win. Or like, and then also the stated goal of we cannot allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. I think there's definitely a big argument to be made that we cannot allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. And I don't remember all the people. I've kind of been out of it for the last week because I was traveling and moving somebody. But I saw that helping a sibling move. But I saw that there were different people that were showing the evidence that Iran was extremely close to actually finishing a nuclear weapon. Now, there's a little bit of a iffy situation there, because we don't know if they have a reliable method, because it's one thing to build a nuke. It's another thing to be able to send that nuke where you want it to go. However, they do apparently had some missiles that they could attach it to, but it could work, and it could very well work. And they could have either shot Israel, they could have shot the United States, but it's a little iffy on whether or not what the percentage of that it might have just blown up, somewhere in Iran, like, because it wasn't the best vehicle for transporting the nuclear weapon. So there's some various things, but that still is like, what are you going to do? Let them build a nuke and then be like, well, they can't lob it over here until they figure out a way, to lob it over there. Like, that's quite the scenario you have going on there. But just to give some dates, it's like if you're going to compare this, which I know you're going to compare it to. No, I forgot. You have the scorecard. You have the scorecard. But I was just looking at the Iraq War. I did familiarize myself with the Iraq War. I did familiarize myself with what we did in Afghanistan. And it's not yet comparable to those things, because we were there for decades and decades and decades. And so far, what we've seen in Iran is we accomplished a specific target and we got out. But I know, Ryan, that you're going to cover that in detail.
Yeah, and I mean, was there anything else you wanted to share about that, or otherwise when we?
Oh, no, not at all. I just was commenting on the fact that if you take all of these things together, it's mainly a rebuke against endless wars, but then also a restating the fact that sometimes you have to use the military for specific targets. But if you're going to use it, you better go in to win. You better go into, and we just saw that with him attacking the Houthis or whatever the other day. That was like they were threatening the international trade through ports, and the terrorists in Yemen were, and then he stopped that and pulled out. And it's just like, all right, now they're no longer a threat to, and if they do it again, it's like they're going to be less likely to do it again the next time, because that doesn't just affect Europe or the rest of the world. That affects us. Our ships and our goods are the ones that go through those ports, almost more than anybody else, because the United States is such a huge international buyer and seller. And so when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's not really quite comparable to be like, we're going to invade this country, boots on the ground, and then we're going to have a quagmire for the next decade or 2 decades like we've seen before. So I'm against those kinds of endless wars, obviously, but I'm not against specific military action when it makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add, because we're defending Trump's campaign promises, essentially. Here's what we're doing in this instance. But at the same time, I would not be shocked at all if Trump said one thing during his campaign promise and didn't follow through on it, because it's like he's a politician, right? And there's no perfect politician out there. nobody's going to be even capable of, even if they had the intent of following through, they're not going to be capable of doing every single thing that they said they would do. But if you look at the consistency of him following up on what he said he was going to do versus all of the other presidents we've had before, you see a very clear, distinct picture. And that's what I would point to is like, well, dang, he's been a lot more consistent in doing what he said he was going to do than most people. And so even the media coming out and saying, well, Trump said this and now he's doing that. It's like, big deal, like big deal. Like one thing that you found, there are a couple of things you found that seem a little off, but even when we talk about the details in this case, they don't seem off. It seems exactly like what he said he was going to do. So that's to me, I'm like, I think that's like, yeah, they just need to be quiet.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, because there are different reasons that campaign promises can't be fulfilled. Okay, so some of them are legitimate, like, well, we just can't get it done. Some of them are maybe ignorance, like a person running for office thinks they can give free lunch to everybody or give recess to everybody, all day long. But it turns out the system doesn't work that way. And there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. And so it's not easy to get all day recess. And so, I think, or it could just be, I'm just going to say whatever I need to do to get elected. I don't really care. And that's, sadly, that's more often the case. I think that they just want to get elected. And that's where the person I ran against in the Iowa House was known as a moderate, like as a Democrat. But if you actually looked at the way he voted, it was 99% with Nancy Pelosi. Like it was 99%, like they wanted the Green New Deal in Iowa, like they wanted the climate, Paris Climate Accord in Iowa, like they wanted all these wacky lefty things. But he was known as a conservative, as a moderate, 0% moderate, And so it's kind of just what's the real reason the promises aren't kept there? And so we're looking at follow through.
Well, you get the moderate label sometimes by saying that you're conservative and then doing everything on the left, and then it balances out, right? So then you land in the middle, right? You got the conservative label, but you have the left action. So that's what ends up hitting you right in the middle.
We can make, how they have the Not Today Satan shirts. And hats, I think we can make Not Today Pelosi shirts.
Oh my God.
That's we'll leave that there. If you remember the drawing I drew, I should have saved it so we could maybe auction it off, where you had the people, what they think they're voting for and what they're actually voting for is way further left. That's because you have a lot of disengagement in Western politics. So,
Ryan, I'm curious. Let's move on. What do you got next for us? Because I know you got a lot. Got a lot to share.
First, I want to get into just real quick, go over the U.S.-Iran history. Just give a little quick recap of the last 75 years, and then we'll get into some of the Middle East engagements, and we'll give our Forever War scorecard, and then we'll get into that playbook and see if Trump is going along with that playbook or not. So let's just dive into the Iran history recap. So back in 1953, there was a CIA-backed coup. The U.S. overthrew Iran's Prime Minister Mossadegh, and then in 1979, what great came out of that? Well, then you had the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And so there was a hostage crisis there. And then in the 1980s, you had the Iran-Iraq War, and you had Iran-Contra. 1988, you had the U.S. shooting down an Iranian civilian plane. And so that obviously caused a lot of problems. It was apparently a mistake, but that obviously a lot of issues there and a lot of hatred for the West and the U.S. So then in the 2000s and 2010s, you had sanctions and sabotage. You had the nuclear deal. You have proxy warfare with Iran through, like Troy talked about, Hezbollah and other militias in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, Hezbollah, all that. The Iran nuclear deal was in 2015. That was under Obama. And that was basically weak, and it empowered Iran financially without really dismantling their nuclear potential at all. And so it was a terrible deal. I'm sure we all remember the suitcases that went over there in the middle of the night of cash, just absolutely absurd. And so, I didn't plan to go into this, but the money laundering that happens over there, because it's a completely separate banking system. And so in Iran, there's a separate money laundering system. When I was a buyer for a Fortune 100 company, I had to sign something every year that said I have not knowingly done business with anybody in Iran. And so it was the only country I remember having to sign that for. So it's a completely separate banking system. So there's lots of money laundering. We could probably do a whole episode on that. Was there something you were going to Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that that's why Trump pulled us out of that. Like a lot of people are saying like, oh, Trump made a huge mistake in 2018 or whenever that when we pulled out of the nuclear deal that Obama set up. And that's why we're in this trouble right now. I'm like, you need to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah. And, so continuing on here. So 2018, Trump withdraws from that deal. 2020, they killed the General Soleimani from Iran, and no war followed that. No invasion followed that. This is just interesting, kind of a break from the playbook, I guess. And so then in 2025, we have this Trump strike, and no ground war, no nation building. And that's what we're seeing so far. So that's really 70 years of mistrust, shadow warfare, proxy violence, and it really led to this direct and overwhelming response from the U.S. And so I think that this is, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, but I mean, it's just crazy, when we look at these sort of things. And people could even compare, taking out Gaddafi, which we'll talk about, or taking out Hussein to taking out Soleimani. But it's a false equivalence as to what's happening and what it was justified to lead to. So go ahead.
I would just want to point out to our audience, I challenge everybody here to go back and take these dates that Ryan just gave and find the connecting point between them, the common denominator. And I'm going to give you a little hint. It's a 3-letter agency. And go look at that. But it comes to a certain point where that 3-letter agency is not quite as involved and it gets more muddy. And that's when we start getting into the Baghdad stuff. And that stuff, when we overthrew, when Saddam Hussein was overthrown and that whole mess happened, there was a whole lot more going on in the background there. And there's some really, I guess the best way to say it is supernatural clandestine stuff going on. I actually did a whole video. We used to have a channel called Mysterious Truth, and we covered like some really deep conspiracy theory stuff, and a super fun channel. And I did a whole video.
That video, that's a crazy video. Yeah,
maybe
we'll put the link. We'll put the link below.
Yeah, it was back in my first video editing days, so that the video editing isn't as good as it should be. But anyway, that's besides the point. So nice. But basically, I went into this story on why we were really over there in Baghdad and Iraq and all of that. And
that's on the Mysterious Truth channel. I don't think I've seen that video.
I think it's on there. Yeah. We'll just it rhymes with Heffalum.
Wow. Let's I'm gonna have to you gotta send that to me. I'm gonna have to watch that.
We'll put it we'll drop that one for people to see.
That's different. What we always go to is it was about the oil, right? Which had us over there for like years and all that, which also I'm not saying that wasn't the case. I do think that it was a part of it, but I think one of the biggest distinctive differences between what just happened and those wars is that we're walking away kind of going like, what did we take from them? It doesn't look the same. It's not the same end result. I don't know how else to explain that, but I don't know.
So let's dive into the scorecard and have a look at some of this stuff. Yeah, so if you want to share my little slides there, we can jump right into this.
Yep. There we go.
So this is a Forever War scorecard. This is kind of a eye chart here is what we call it. Lots of details, but feel free to screenshot it and go ahead and go through it. So let's just dive into this. So we've already talked. So we've got Iraq, we've got Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and then Iran. And so if we go back and look at Iraq, so we have 8 years of war. So, and like we mentioned, there's lots of stuff still ongoing. But we have starting in 2020 or 2003, there was 4,500 plus U.S. deaths and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi deaths, over a true $2.4 trillion spent. And the outcome was regime change, so-called regime change, the rise of ISIS. You have Saddam gone, you have a power vacuum, and you have a regional destabilization. So not exactly what I would call a home run on that one. So not good. We have, next up, we have Afghanistan. And so let me pull up, I've got a few other notes. I don't have them on the slide here, but Afghanistan, I mean, we saw over 20 years, we saw that horrendous pullout in 2020, in 2021 from the Biden regime. And I mentioned on another show that I met somebody from a consulate in another country that actually didn't even know that we were going to be withdrawing until they saw it on the news, which is absolutely unheard of in a U.S. consulate. And so they actually heard about it. They actually supported the Biden regime until that point. And he said, that's unforgivable. It is just absolutely off the wall, off the chain, whatever you want to call it, as far as crazy as what they did.
One of the most embarrassing things, military actions that the United States has ever done.
Probably the top
in the history of the United States. It was all right, we're pulling out tomorrow. And then the I don't even remember the sheer. I've seen the videos of the Taliban driving around and all the military gear that we left behind, just leaving hordes of tanks and the smaller armed vehicles, and I think planes. I think we left them planes. We just we couldn't have figured out a better way.
$80 billion
to take this stuff back home. We had to pull out so quickly that we left them billions of dollars in military equipment. As like a parting gift. They didn't.
Man, that was insane. And they didn't even follow a playbook that somebody with no military experience would have avoided. Like anybody with no military experience would know we should probably get the civilians out first, and then we should either take the equipment out or blow it up so that they don't get the technology and just sell it and use it, which is the playbook. I mean, that's what you do. That's not what they did. So there's obviously something else going on behind that and leading that and puppeteering and all that. So $2.3 trillion spent, over 2,000 lives lost. Absolutely infuriating. That's U.S. casualties. Taliban back in power. Again, not a home run. That is worse than a strikeout. That is like cussing and getting thrown out of the game and just absolute it's just ridiculous. Then we have Libya. So Libya, still unstable today, 2025. Gaddafi was killed. There was no plan for governance. They just went in, took him out. They have warlords, militias, and slave markets now that have emerged in Libya. This is serious, man. I mean, this is ongoing since 2011. And so you have a proxy impact, over $1 billion spent, and it's just a failed state. And so it's still going on today. We have this terrorism incubator there. There's U.S. influence has diminished over there. So another not home run. So just swing and a miss here. We are not doing well on this scorecard. So what about Syria? So 10 plus years there was limited troops and airstrikes there. The cost is unknown, but Assad still in power. So there's we could get into what happened was it Syria or Libya with Clinton and with the killing that happened because they didn't give the security that they were requesting.
Are you talking about
but she says, what difference does it make in front of Congress?
No, that was oh my gosh, I
can't believe it. I have it here, but I got too many notes. I can't find it. So maybe you can help us out in the comments here. So as you think of that, I mean, let's go and look at Trump's Iran strike. So 2025, this year, just in June 2025, one night of bombing, no troops deployed, no regime change, used B-2 stealth bombers plus bunker busters for strategic, psychological, and military impact. And the outcome was nuclear program crippled. So at least temporarily, we don't know exactly what that will mean, but Iran was absolutely humiliated and the U.S. deterrence was reasserted. So
Benghazi.
This is... Go ahead. Benghazi. Okay. Yeah. So I didn't get any details on that, but so we could see a clear difference here. So I think if you look at more on why this strike is different. So let's look at the strategy, the duration, the method, the outcome, and the public reaction. So the strategy was for the past interventions was regime change or occupation. It's basically a precursor for troops ground occupation or troop ground invasion or troop action or just more action on the ground there, risking U.S. troops' lives. So this was instead, it was a deterrent. There was no follow-up, and there is still been no follow-up. And so the duration was lasting years versus one night. The previous interventions, the method was troops and rebuilding and all this efforts and bases and all this kind of stuff. And this one was stealth bombers and precision. So very clear precision in the strike. The outcome was chaos and insurgency in the past examples I gave in the past interventions. And this one was a nuclear setback and U.S. deterrence. And so the public reaction was mixed, and on the previous ones, prolonged fatigue. People are really woke up to the fact that it's a forever war and there's no real end in sight. And so this one today, it has been polarizing, but it's decisive. I mean, it is just black and white. It's very clear. And so we've tried to give some clarity as to far as why this is absolutely a not equivalent. And, what we used to take a decade to send a message, and now they just send it with a B2 and it's done. Like it's a one night and they got the message. And we're starting to see what Trump is doing and coming out of this. So it's going to be interesting to see. So any other comments? Otherwise, we'll dive into our forever war.
You use B2 stealth bombers, and there's the psychological impact. But I mean,
think about that. Think about that.
Think about the psychological impact of dropping a 30,000-pound bomb.
From the other side of the world,
psychologically impacted.
Flew from the other side of the world undetected. And here's the thing: is you think, why did they share all? I can't believe they shared all the details. And they said they sent ones this way and then they went that way. It's like, well, yeah, that's what they're saying. But like, you really think that they don't know exactly what they're sharing and why they're sharing it? And just, it's crazy.
I would say, as far as the outcome is involved, Iran humiliated. That's not going to do anything. Like there's no, you know what I mean? Like what are the actual practical effects of what took place? And I think that they are there. That's what I'm saying. They are there. And I think somebody's pushback would be, okay, yeah, but this only happened last week, so is this the start of something more? Like that would be somebody's pushback. And I would say, well, just look at what's happened so far. And, the claims that are out there saying, this is just like Iraq. This is just like that. It's like, none of that's happened, and Ryan just showed that very clearly, so I'd say if it leads to all that eventually, then you could say that, right? But you can't say that right now. You could say we don't want to lead there, and it's like, but I'm saying the same thing. I don't want to go there. We don't want to go there.
What's happening is,
that's the point. And so I don't know. I think looking at the details can help a lot.
These are what's happening is this is people who are the people who are saying that this is the same thing over again. From what I have seen, and I'm sure there's more than just this, but one of the biggest segments of people who are saying this are people who have picked up on the idea that the conspiracy theorists, quote unquote, over the years have been right in advance, and they want to jump on that train. And this is an easy one to jump on because it would be, if you're not paying attention, it looks like that. But a real true, I hate to say it like this, but a real true conspiracy theorist knows already where this is going and knows that this is a facade. This is just another, like, you're laughing, right? But that's what it is.
People worth their weight in Bitcoin know what's really going on here.
Yeah. What's that?
You're not a true conspiracy theorist. Okay?
Yeah, true conspiracy theorists are worth their weight in Bitcoin. So, that's
Iranian Bitcoin or
yes, that's awesome. Finish your rant. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I meant for that to be quick.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying it's these people who they want to jump in this like special group and be like considered, this, but like, oh, I knew all along, and they want them.
Yeah.
When this happens, you're gonna come back and thank me. Like, keep like record this. Like, make sure you note this. I'm like, okay, yeah, we are gonna note that, and then you're gonna pretend like it never happened when it comes time for that receipt to be pulled, and we're gonna be like, wasn't what you thought it was it? But the thing is, they keep moving the goalpost, and they're not even moving it like backward, like, or away. They're moving it in all different directions too. It's all over the place because they're making excuses as they go along.
That's the problem. There's no consistency. They're calling for consistency on the other side, but there's no consistency there.
Right. It's just, that's the playbook. And actually, you just hit step number 6, the final and perpetuating step of the playbook we're going to go into, which is move the goalpost.
Hey, there we go.
Go ahead, Troy. Were you going to say something else? Any other thoughts?
I was just going to say, Doug, I want to know what the code, like Pirates of the Caribbean, there's a pirate code. And if you don't keep to the pirate code, you're not a real pirate anymore. They're going to kick you out of the club. I want to know what the real conspiracy theorist code is, that keeps you in the club. Because
I can give you the nomenclature of the code, but it's not easy, and you have to.
It is a conspiracy theory itself.
Yeah, it's called Francis Bacon. Weird.
I'm gonna have
to do a whole episode on just conspiracy theory culture. I think that would be fantastic.
That would be great, because I want to know if I'm worth my weight in Bitcoin or not.
Would be enlightening for sure.
Are you real? Like a test. We could have a test, that you could take. Are you a true conspiracy
theorist? That's good. Any other thoughts before I go into this playbook?
Yeah, just really quick. Since we were talking about the whole conspiracy theory thing, and then also just landing on like, oh, this is the same as previous ones. I do think that there's something to be said about this because it is. I understand. I can have some sympathy for because one, 2 points. One is I don't know. We might be eating our words later and being like, oh, this is nothing like Libya and Iraq. It's nothing like Afghanistan. I'd have no idea. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm hoping, I would say I'm hoping that it's nothing like that. So far with what Trump has done, I feel pretty comfortable to say that it's probably not going to be like the rest. It probably is just going to be specific strikes and we're good. However, after we struck Iran, actually after Israel struck Iran, there was a ramp up between Iran and Israel bombing each other. And so are we going to see something like that? Is Iran going to try to reach out and bomb, military bases or whatever, and that's going to continue to escalate this? We don't know. We don't know the future. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we can compare right now and say, so far, this has been very different from past ones, and I think that's valid. However, I do want to say that I have some sympathy for people. My second point is I have sympathy for people who say, oh, this is exactly like all of the endless wars. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't have this kind of involvement. And I think the reason being is because the United States has done so many unwise things in the past that it's hard not to just anything that happens to say, oh, this also is unwise. And the same way, I think that some people get a little too, this is my opinion, but I think some people will go a little too far with the conspiracy theory stuff when they say anytime that the government does anything, they're like, they have a secret, nefarious plot behind the specific thing that they're doing. And I'm like, I don't think they do. But I understand why somebody gets into that mindset because the government has lied so many times in the past, and they have spied on their own citizens, and they have, and the intelligence community has done a lot of really evil and secretive things, right? And so once you have a history of doing those kinds of things, you can just without thinking, without having evidence, you just apply the same pattern and say, well, they're just doing the same kind of things that they've done before. Yeah. But I think my encouragement is to say, just don't make crazy claims unless you actually have evidence. Like we have evidence that this is something that has occurred, that this is something that is like the things in the past, or you're just saying, well, we've done things like this before, and so this has to be exactly like what we've done in the past.
Yeah, and I agree mostly with that. Well, I agree entirely with that, to be honest. But I would just add that I think that sometimes we can get confused with government nefarious plots that are like separate from what we're being told and ulterior motives, and it's like it's a scale, like it's a degree, like how far into government secret nefarious plot is it, or is it really just an ulterior motive that they didn't want to tell us about? Like it can be that simple sometimes, and I think it falls in that that category in some point for almost everything that the government does. But these people are trying to their evidence is based on predictions, and it's like incoming evidence. I'm like, that's not easy to do.
Sure. Yeah. I think that what's important is that we understand also, Trump really, you have this idea of, okay, politicians are all talking, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's this tug and pull, kind of completely disconnected from we the people, and not really talking about what we want them to be talking about, or they're talking about it, but behind the doors, they're not actually doing any of those things that we want them to be moving forward on. And what Trump represented was bringing government back to we the people. It was completely from outside. And then, you can see how it's evidenced in how the left turned on him. They loved him. All the Democrats, all the politicians, everybody loved him. And even on the right. And then all of a sudden everybody starts to hate him after he ran for office and showed that he was actually for the things that he has actually been saying for decades. So, okay, let's dive into this war playbook. Now, I want to first recognize our audience is incredible. You guys are blowing up the chat. And so I want to just thank you for that. That's very helpful in getting this out to more people. And I like the conversation back and forth as well. So for this scorecard or this playbook, I want to know where you see the examples of what I'm going to share. So go ahead and put those in the chat, and let's go ahead and dive right into this. This is the war playbook. Now, this is trademark pending. I am not going to be, it is not trademark pending. I put that there. So you can go ahead and submit that trademark. I don't want any credit for this. The only way that I came up with this was using God-given powers of observation and just seeing what's happening. And also, the internet machine. And so this is a 6-step thing that is, I say it's made to be broken because we don't want this playbook. Like, forget this playbook, get rid of this playbook. But let's go ahead and dive in to see how this playbook has been dusted off again and again and used over and over in the past. So let's go ahead and jump right in here. Now, let's see. Step number 1, manufacture the threat. So they're all evil. They're dangerous. They're coming for you. So fear is the first weapon that's deployed.
Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
Exactly.
They definitely do. We haven't seen them. We don't have any evidence that they have weapons of mass destruction, but they believe us. They have them. Exactly. They've got them.
But wait, there's more. Libya, imminent genocide. Syria, chemical weapons. Iran, nuclear breakout. So you see, even past things with Iran were misused. But this one, we actually, I mean, that could have been like, oh, we got to go in with our troops and we got to find these sites and we got to neutralize and we got like, that could have been the playbook, but that's not the playbook that was used. We'll get into that here, Trump's approach, but it's always vague, always emotional. But you see what Trump has done is not vague and it wasn't emotional. It was very specific. Okay. So we'll get into that comparison, but again, put them in the chat, what you see here. But feel free to jump in if you guys have any on these. I'm just going to run through these. So step 2, frame it as a moral imperative. So the war becomes a virtue signal. So we must act to save lives, promote democracy, or protect human rights. And that sounds amazing. Like, yes, I want that. So, you know, if you're going to be against that, then I guess you're against this war. Well, actually, let's see. We have a responsibility to protect civilians. That's what they said for Libya. What about?
Oh my gosh. And that one is insane because from what I understand with the Gaddafi Libya thing, I think really and I'm going to oversimplify this again, but this is a big topic that I encourage everybody to go do some deep research on. But Gaddafi and the whole government in Libya actually was just on the verge of breaking free from the petrodollar, and we didn't like that. And so, we need to go free the people from this oppression that they're going to. What?
Yeah.
I do think that's there's something in that for sure. That might be very close to the truth.
I think on this step, Ryan. On this step, I'm just like, I would say it's even more general than this. Like everything nowadays is framed as a moral imperative. Everything.
Just and the playbook.
As a culture, we're facing a moral imperative fatigue. You know, it's just like overload. And I think it's part of the reason that, the conservatives started waking up again, like back in 2015, is because we realized like, oh, wait a minute. Like, and it wasn't just happening on the liberal side, it was happening on the conservative side as well. But I think a group of people woke up and said, I'm tired of everything being labeled as a moral imperative when there's actually no morals attached to it most of the time. There's no real ethics attached to it. It's sometimes there are, but a lot of times there's not, or the ethics are a lot more blurry. The lines are a lot more blurry than people say they are, And so I don't know. I think, that hits the nail on the head as far as war is concerned as well. But I think it's a much more general, especially when politicians are involved. And the media and everything, it's a much more general problem.
You're exactly right about the general problem. And just real quick, I'll give you some examples of how we're seeing the fatigue setting in. There's certain words that have lost their meaning nowadays that have used to be used as magic spells. I'll give you a couple. One is the R word, racist, sexist, homophobic, things like that. They've kind of like lost. People are just like, you can say that word all you want. I just think of like the Lord of the Rings. We were talking about Lord of the Rings the other day. It's like, that spell has no power here or something like that. That has no power is basically that. It's like there's been a growing fatigue among, people in the center, conservatives, even some people on the left that are just like, hey, these words, they don't mean anything to people anymore. You can call me that all you want. You call the people that it's not doing anything. And I won't say it on this channel for censorship's sake, but a certain group of mid 1900s Germans also gets thrown around a lot. If we want to paint somebody as it's so evil that we have to apply this label to them because they're the embodiment of evil. So that's a moral imperative that we are against this. That's why the Russians are mid 19th centuries Germans. That's why Israel. If you don't like Israel and the Israel-Palestine, they're the Germans. It's like whoever it's got to be a moral imperative. The evilest thing you can think of, it has to be applied to them. And it's gotten to the point where people are like, I don't care. You can call people that all you want. There's no more moral imperative here because you've burnt out the so-called moral currency that was behind those words. No longer have the currency to them anymore.
Yeah. And so for those of you just tuning in, we're going through the war playbook, and we're going to compare to whether Trump has followed this war playbook that has been used over decades, over the last century. So Finishing up step 2 here, frame it as a moral imperative. We had freedom versus tyranny for Iraq. And Obama said the arc of history bends toward justice. And so a nice flowery thing to say there. So again, war just becomes a giant virtue signal. And as Troy and Reese so elegantly pointed out, it's not only war, this is used everywhere. So congratulations on observing that. Okay, step 3, enlist the media machine. And so it says push public consent through emotional saturation. And so this is, we have shocking footage, all the experts agree, trust the intelligence, like, let's just get that all on the media. So you have embedded journalists in Iraq. As an example, you have CNN, Fox, and MSNBC. They parrot Pentagon talking points from this past year. And you have ex-generals on TV, and they also happen to be on the boards of directors of defense contractors. So this is, it's just a machine. It's just a machine. Yeah. So public consent through emotional saturation. And so I think everybody probably has lots more examples that they can include on this as well. Next up, step 4, we have a promise, a quick victory. It'll be fast and we'll be greeted as liberators, they say. And so shock and awe, mission accomplished, limited airstrikes. These are all what we hear. And they say, this, well, I'll save that quote for the end here. Let's say, the war is like a product. It's cheap, clean, and effective. So they sell it like that, just a product. So really disgusting and ridiculous. All right, step 5, quietly lock in profits. So reconstruction contracts, weapons sales, and base expansion. So Iraq, Halliburton, Syria, Raytheon. What about Lockheed Martin? They always seem to win. So go ahead and just look up their involvement, or you can go ahead and see their stock prices. You can see what's going on with them. Of course, I want to be clear, like, we need defense contractors, like we need private interests helping the government and that sort of thing. But there's a very big difference in being prepared for war and or deterring war through strength, as Trump has talked about. But there's a difference between that and let's start a war so that we can have more profits and make more, and we can support campaigns. And I didn't even have a segment here. I wanted to, but I didn't have time to research it, about the funding that happens to campaigns of warmongers and where that money's coming from. And so that's a whole nother thing that we can dive into. For Forever Wars is just a business model. It's not a blunder. So let's see. Step number 6. So Doug spilled the beans on this one before we even got into this segment, but move the goalposts. So we need to just stay a little bit longer. Welcome to year 10 of this 30-day strike. I love that quote. So they find new villains. So ISIS, militias, extremists, they changed the mission from regime change to now we got to stabilize and we got to keep peace. It's kind of like, again, I always give this example of somebody setting a fire in the backyard and then going to the front door and sell a fire extinguisher. It's like, oh, it's only $1,000, but you need it. So they wouldn't need it if you didn't set the fire. So we wouldn't need to keep peace and have stabilization if you didn't remove the leader without a plan or without actually needing to do that. And so then they say, we can't pull out now because it would be irresponsible. So it's kind of like, you start one thing and you got to keep it going. So, okay, that's the playbook. Any thoughts before I go into whether Trump followed this playbook or not?
My only comment is that last line reminds me also of the certain pandemic playbook as well that we had with the welcome to year 10 of the 30-day strike. It's like, welcome to year 2 of the 2 weeks to stop the spread.
Yes.
It's like, 2 weeks? I think we actually said 2 years. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
We said 2 years from the beginning, not 2 weeks. It was 2 years. 2-year lockdown, 2 years.
That's right. Well said. So I have a name for Trump's playbook, and let's go into that now. It's called the Trump Bunker Busted Playbook. And so we're going to go ahead and dive into whether or not he followed this war playbook. And so this is the Trump Bunker Busted Playbook. Okay, so Trump says in 2025, we didn't start a forever war. We stopped a forever threat. And so what about fear mongering? Did he do that? Well, he called the Iraq war a lie, and he actually mocked the weapons of mass destruction narrative. What about moral appeal? Well, he rejected nation building, and he says no spreading democracy. Now, you can see his quote that he had about regime change, but that's not saying that the U.S. is going to do regime change. The people over in Iran certainly can do regime change, and I think that when we say that it humiliated Iran, it really humiliated the leadership. And then you see that the growing emboldenedness of the people of Iran. And so that is the idea behind that, is it's humiliating them. You saw people leaving Tehran when Trump gave this thing. So they're following directions from another leader from another country as far as advice goes. And so we see not that sort of engagement. We don't have this fake moral play up. Okay, so then we have, what about media campaign? Well, he ignored the media consensus and he bypassed them with Twitter. So this is just absolutely incredible. I mean, they just had a blackout, and you see the media is all against and twisting and all this kind of thing. So that should really give you a clue. It's not the only information you need as far as what the truth is, but it should give you a clue as to where the truth lies, and whether the truth actually is, and whether or not it's on the side of what the media is saying or not. So a victory promise. So there was no, overhyped promise of victory. It was just action. Like, it's done. Like, we struck, and that's it. And so then you have profiteering. So no Halliburton rebuild contracts, no ground war, as we see no of these big defense contractors that we're expecting to come in. And so again, all of this is for the time being, but we certainly don't see this same playbook going out over again and again and again. And as we saw every other time, it's the same thing again and again and again. And this is certainly a bunker busted playbook. This is not the war playbook, as it were. Mm-hmm. So then we have the mission creep. So it was a one-night strike. There was no occupation, no follow-up. Again, for the time being, but we should expect that it would continue to go that route. So others sold war like a moral duty, and Trump treated this as more of like a strategic correction. It was brief, it was brutal, but it's finished. And so the idea now is to see what comes next, and to see whether or not this is going to go the way it should. We saw a peace deal get negotiated, and we saw Trump's frustration with some of the reactions from Israel, both Israel and Iran, right after that. But if you watched Trump's address to the U.S., I kind of wanted to show a clip, but we won't have time for it. But you can see at the end where he is sort of choked up, and he thanks God for how everything went. And so the thing is, he obviously was torn in doing this, and so you can see it wasn't like you see where it's somebody who ran hoping to do this and wanting to do this. You see a real reluctance there. And so, but I do think he does know what he's doing, and we can see, we will see what comes out of it. So any other thoughts on this before we go into our final segment?
I think that's a really good point. You say that Trump's reluctance, because he definitely showed a lot of genuine concern of trying to get a new nuclear deal with Iran. And before Israel stepped in and did the strikes, he was like, we're going to, try to, and then began warning Iran of like, hey, this is going to be bad if you don't strike a deal with us, if you don't stop enriching uranium and we come to an agreement where you're not able to create a nuclear weapon, like there's going to be consequences. And Israel dealt out the first blow of consequences, and then he dealt out the second blow of consequences. But I do think it's a really good point to show. And now he's like, okay, let's do a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, if that's possible. I don't know if that's going to be possible or not, but you do see him kind of straddling the line there between like trying to bring peace when it's possible, but then also being like, okay, this has to be done. And I think that when you're dealing with Iran, more often than not, eventually you will get to that point of saying, okay, this has to be done, because unfortunately their government, which you talked about, their government being humiliated, it is entirely propped up by the constant need to be plotting against the destruction of Israel, which is not a legitimate way to run a government. I mean, I don't have too much time to get into this, but the government of Iran wholeheartedly, and their secret service wholeheartedly, believes an Islam prophecy that in order for the end times to be ushered in, they must wipe out all the Jews. That is like, that's not just propaganda. Right. That is, and maybe the top guy, I don't know if he wholeheartedly believes that. Maybe he's just using that as a way to stay in power, but they're like secret service. They believe it. They believe it. They think that is 100% a reality. And that's not a legitimate way to run a government. And so when you're dealing with somebody like that, eventually you probably will have to, you get to the point of saying, you keep you keep breaking your promises, you keep enriching uranium past the point that you need, and we're gonna, so we have to do something about this. And I think you see that from Trump. You see that reluctance of like, I don't want to get involved in another war.
Yeah.
But they're not coming to an agreement, and we can't let them do this. So we will do this strike, we'll finish the job, and we'll get out. And that's what we've seen so far. And I think that's what the U.S. military, that's the kind of stuff the U.S. military should do. I mean, if we're going to use our military for something, we should use it for something that makes the world a better place, and not something that promotes, endless wars that we've talked about before. So,
yeah, I agree. We've actually covered the ideologies behind Iran and the Iran government in several previous episodes, and I can link to some of those below after this. But I think this is a good point, Reese. My one thing, Ryan, about Trump's bunker busted playbook that I thought of was this channel cannot afford to pay Trump royalties yet, so you're gonna have to change that name. Just FYI. So yeah,
fair use. I'm gonna claim fair use on that, but okay, yeah, that's a good point. Okay, guys. Before I go to our last segment, who wore it better? We're going to get tickets to the DC Political Theater. I want to know if you guys think we're making the case here, or what's missing. What have we not clearly stated so far? What have we not gone into, or what else do we need to add to make sure that we're making the case here that this is not business as usual as far as the elites go in getting wars started? What else are we missing, or have we made that clear here?
Well, I think that the problem is that we have made it clear. Well, that's not the problem, but there's a problem that comes on the end of this. We have made it clear, but what's going to happen is the number one argument that keeps coming back on this is, well, you have to wait and see because we just haven't seen the manifestation of the rest of this yet. The argument is that we are still going to be going to war. It just hasn't happened yet. And so I think we've made a really good case for this not being exactly like it has been in the past, but because it hasn't happened yet, there are going to be those who are still coming out and they're going to say, right, maybe you've got a point, but time will tell. And I don't, it's a good argument, but I think that we've kind of taken out at least most of the legs of it, especially with like your two playbook things. That's perfect. You put those up against each other. And I mean, the only way you could refute that is if you just found inconsistencies in that and could add more to it. Like maybe there was something missing. I don't know. As far as I can tell, you did a really thorough job, and those line up perfectly in contrast to each other. And I don't see how you could really point out any faults in it, to be honest. So the only thing that would be a potential is if this kind of just restarts, you know what I mean? Like if like we find ourselves in a couple months from now, or even a year from now, and something else happens, and then the war playbook that you put out is engaged instead. But it would literally have to be a restart. We're at the point that we're at right now. I don't think we could go back to the start of that war playbook and implement those strategies. We kind of got to finish the Trump's bunker strategy. I can't remember what you called it, but we have to finish that one out. So I guess that's my biggest point is we'd literally have to completely restart, and then that's when it would start falling apart. But that would be different in my opinion. So, but I think that you did cover it well. It's just people are going to argue it regardless of whether or not you made a good point, because that's what people do.
I think it will be different if we do end up going, and I'm not going to take war off the table. I'm definitely not going to take war off the table, Doug. But like you said, if we do end up going to war, it will be a very different scenario in the past, because at this, and I might be completely off here, but what I'm looking at this moment is just that if Iran keeps getting weakened, and this is also why Israel went ahead and struck Iran, because they're at one of their weakest points that they've been. And I think that allowed America to, I mean, we could have done it regardless, but I think that was further emboldened America to be like, all right, we're definitely going to wipe out these sites because you're getting close to potentially making a nuclear bomb. And also they're in a weakened state. And with that being said, though, I think there's sort of like there can be a desperation that occurs. I already talked about the ideology behind the government, and the people do not like the Iranian government. A lot of people do not like the Iranian government. That's part of the reason why it's so easy for intelligence communities of Israel and potentially other people to find people in Iran who are willing to spill secrets and give information and stuff like that, is because there's a lot of people in Iran who don't like the current government and would be willing to have a regime change. Anyways, but that said, if I could see a scenario where the Iranian government gets really desperate and is like, we got to do something or we're going to lose the people. We have to justify what we're doing. We have to justify where we're at. We can't be humiliated like this. And if they go too dramatic and they go too crazy and some barrage against U.S. military bases or something like that, then you're obviously going to see a retaliation. I don't know what it would look like, but again, that's a very different scenario than the other wars that we've seen in the past, the endless wars we've seen in the past. It's a very different scenario, and I could see Trump following through in a very different way than what we've seen in the past as well. But I'm definitely not going to take war off the table, and not going to ridicule somebody that thinks that this is inevitably going to lead to war. I don't think it has to, but if Iran does certain decisions, I guess it probably could.
Yeah, I think what Doug said is pretty much true across the board. Like, time will tell. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Time will tell. I think for now, Ryan's points all stand up, and they all hold truth. So it's like time will tell if they're going to continue, we're going to continue down that same path or not. But as far as we are right now, I think we made the right move. So Ryan, let's finish out, man. What do you got? Because we're over an hour already. So
we'll make this last part quick here. But I do agree, when we have to look at a foundational approach. And so we don't think that troops on the ground are going to solve anything. And there was a very clear thing that wanted to be solved by that. But we saw, things like Pearl Harbor, an attack on U.S. soil, drew the U.S. into what otherwise should not have been a war they were involved in. And so we're not taking our eye off the ball. There's potential that something else could happen. But the problem is, I've even seen reports from CIA, former CIA agents that said, they knew about Pearl Harbor. They knew it was going to happen, and they let it happen because they wanted to get into the war. And so this is something that we need to keep our eye on. And so, yes, but there's a foundational reason, a foundational approach to governing, a preponderance of evidence for what we've seen as far as a different approach to governing, a different approach to leadership on the global stage. And so that's why we're saying, it does make sense, but we're hopeful, but we're not like blindly hopeful. We're hopeful because of the foundational things we've seen and the differences we've seen, like we said, in the different playbooks. Okay, let's go into our final segment here. It's called Who Wore It Better? And this is, got your tickets to DC Political Theater. And we're going to go ahead and talk about indecision, overreach, moral justification, and see if we see any contrasts between what has been said in the past and what is being said today from Trump. So, all right, what about the Iraq War? Let's give a few quotes from there. Let's go back in time to 2003 during the 48-hour ultimatum speech from President George W. Bush. He said, "Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraq regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised." And that was, again, March 17th, 2003. Now, 2003, May 29th, just a few months later, it says, "We found the weapons of mass destruction. We found the weapons of mass destruction. We found biological laboratories." That was later proven false. Let's see. We also have from President, that was also from Bush. We have Dick Cheney says, "We will be greeted as liberators." And he was predicting Iraqis would welcome U.S. troops. And then in 2016, we have Trump said, "They lied. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and they knew there were none." Okay, so who won that round of political theater? What do you guys think?
Well, actually, Bush won that round of political theater, because if you were to do a poll of the entire United States, the majority of people still believe that to be the truth.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well said. Okay, good point. It depends on what we mean by win. So I'll give you that one. Yeah. All right, let's talk.
Theater's all about being dramatic. So
that's right. So you're right. I guess that's
what. Yeah, when my kids ask me about like acting and stuff, they're like, "Oh, are they a good actor?" I'm like, "Well, the best actors are the ones that are the most believable. Doesn't matter whether or not like
good or bad.
Did they like have the right expression on their faces? Like, did you believe them? Yes. Did you not? Okay, that's all.
Yeah, good point.
Bottom line.
Okay, what about Syria? You've heard this term "red line." Let's go ahead and talk about that. So here's a quote from Obama in 2013. "A red line for us would be if we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized." Well, we saw that he drew a red line, and then that line was crossed, and then, well, they did nothing about it. And so that was completely humiliating for the U.S. In Trump, he said, "We didn't draw a red line. We dropped it from 40,000 feet." That's Trump. I think Trump won that one. I'm going to give that one to Trump. What do you guys think? I We didn't
think
draw a red
so.
line. We dropped it from 40,000 feet. He gets to the point. Okay, Libya intervention, Obama, 2011. To brush aside America's responsibility as a leader and, more profoundly, our responsibilities to our fellow human beings under such circumstances would have been a betrayal of who we are. That was justifying the Libya attacks, or Libya strikes. Hillary Clinton, 2011. We came, we saw, he died. And then she laughs, talking about Gaddafi's death. Trump says,
Don't make me think about Hillary Clinton's laugh.
Oh man, not
Nightmare
cackle. That's
for
Kamala.
weeks.
Okay, I guess they flock together. So let's see. Trump 2024. We don't bomb to feel better about ourselves. We bomb to stop the threat fast. So that was a rally in Florida, March 2024. Who won that round? Syria, Libya. Who are we going to give it to?
Well, according to the MSM, wasn't there like no wars during Obama's reign? Like he didn't do anything bad.
Oh yeah, that's right. Good point. Yeah,
So
we gotta
throw that in
check
there.
the sources on that one.
Just do a quick search on the amount of drone strikes that Obama authorized.
He would never do such a thing, though.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
that was a
I
good
just wanna
that was
know
a good
who's writing
Babylon
Trump's-
B. That was a good Babylon B article back in the day. Was like Obama criticizing Trump for like criticizing people on Twitter or something like that and saying it was unpresidential. They put out one that was like, Obama's like, oh, I would never say such mean things about people while I'm in office. The people I don't like, I just hit them with the old drone strike. It's much more efficient.
Jeez.
No scandals, nothing. He was.
Did he use Biden's auto pen thing too? I don't know. Maybe that was part of that, but okay. All right, final one here. Afghanistan. Let's see. Bush, 2001. The Taliban will pay a price. That was after 9/11, which that's also a very controversial thing that maybe we should cover that and how that actually happened with some nail clippers or whatever that was. Okay, Obama. So that was 2001. Obama, 2009. This is not a war of choice. This is a war of necessity. Okay, that's Afghanistan. Trump 2020. We're not nation building. We're killing terrorists, then getting the hell out. So that's pardon my French there, or I don't know what you want to call that, but King James version. So
King James.
the thing is, so that's what we have. Who won that round? What about the final round there? Who won that round of political theater?
Well, Trump clearly won the lineup of quotes that you've laid out there. I love that they connect so well. The ones that you found are pretty nice and connected.
There's even more. We don't have time for it.
One comparison there is absolutely fantastic, but it really shows the difference in like I guess even like war ideology. I guess between the past and the present president.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
So we've drawn some.
I want to know who's writing his one-liners because I'm like, I need to hire them to fix my one-liners.
I think it's just the New York in him, man. I had a guy that I was roommates with in college from New York, and I could just sit and listen to that guy all day, just randomly riff on things, and it's just, and with the accent, I mean, it's just very entertaining. Truth bombs, bunker busting truth bombs from those guys.
That's awesome.
Guys, so we tried to draw a very big contrast here between the war playbook of the past, the new bunker busted playbook from Trump, and what's different. Back and forth. We played a couple games here. We had some fun. But what closing statements do you guys have, or any final thoughts on anything we need to cover before we wrap up?
I have one that's might be a little bit off, not really off the wall, but I thought this was interesting. I was talking to a friend about this situation, and they pointed out something I thought that was kind of bizarre. I don't know how true this is. I would need to do some more research on it, but it was just the idea that essentially for the Iranian government, that in some ways it is more useful for them to not actually fully get to the point where they create a nuclear bomb, but actually just stay within the 80% range, like 80% enrichment, 80% completion, because it allows them to sort of have legitimacy of power over their own people and to be a threat to Israel. Be like, you guys better not, we're going to wipe you out. We're going to wipe you out. And they talk, it's sort of like a dog talking big, and barking a lot. And then like you open the gate and then it's like, it doesn't do anything, doesn't attack you. It's sort of that scenario. And I wonder how true that is. It's kind of interesting because, again, I know there's a heavy ideology there in Iran where they really do. A lot of them really do want to wipe out Israel. But also it's one of those situations where it's like, if you actually created a bomb, now you have to do something with it. Like you have to, once you have it, you can't, if they created one then the government would no longer be legitimate if they just sat on it, because they're saying to their people that this is their whole purpose. This is what they're going to do.
We're going to make a bomb so that we can use it. Yeah.
Right. They would have to immediately use it. And so it's interesting when you think about it that way, because it might give some credence for why they've kind of like sat around on the, but then also you have Israel and the United States and the rest of the world trying to keep them from finishing it. So I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if it's true. So I'm curious to see what will happen, because we've taken out so many of their nuclear sites, and I wonder if they'll ever get to the point where they start working on it again. And I wonder how many people in the government are like actually want to just keep power, and to keep power they want to be seen as a threat. And so they'll keep working on it, but they don't really want to finish. And how many people are like completely sold out? We have to finish the bomb, and then we have to wipe out Israel. Just a food for thought. I thought it was kind of an interesting analysis, but I don't know where truth lies between those 2 points.
I think that's a very, very good point to raise. Yeah, and we could do a whole nother episode on that probably alone. That thought process, because that really is like once you finally, it's like a bully that's teasing somebody, and then the person finally stands up to them and says, okay, if you actually want to fight, let's fight. And then they're like, oh, well, I don't really want to fight, like,
exactly. Yeah.
Like, like I just was wanting to, maintain dominance over you. And so, once the facade is broken, then it's like, okay, are you going to do this or not? I think that's a really, really good point, Reese.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of, there's a children's book called The Grouchy Ladybug, and that's exactly what it is. The Grouchy Ladybug continues to like try to fight everything that's bigger than it, and then at the end of the book, obviously, he doesn't. But anyway, I just thought that was a cute analogy. My final thought is that I just want to make it kind of clear, like my position on it, because I obviously am a little bit passionate about this kind of thing. The idea of this action that Trump has taken right now with Iran versus what has happened in the past, like this whole topic, right? I do believe that the Mossad and the CIA have been working kind of hand in hand for years now, and they have been a big part of a lot of these disruptions that have been happening in these forever wars. But I also believe that has ceased somehow with this new pivot that we have made. I don't think it's the same thing. I don't know all the details as to exactly how they got rooted out, or exactly how they got cut off from their influence with what's happening now. Certainly it's with whatever Trump is doing, but there's a palpable difference between what's happening now and what used to happen. And so if it weren't for whatever Trump has done, I would say we probably would have been in this war. If we had Kamala Harris as president, definitely same playbook, we'd be right in it. But something's different. I can't put a finger on it other than what we've already covered here. So that's all I've got.
Yeah, it'd probably take a lot of journalistic time and digging to find that, because that sounds very, very hard to come up with the evidence for. But
the problem with the intelligence community is they don't want you to know what they're doing. So it's
exactly
hard to know.
That's the reason why.
It's hard to know what the secret people are doing, because they usually are very secret about it. There's a lot of
redirecting as well, giving you something else to chew on. So well, gentlemen, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for watching. Make sure you check out our members only content. We've got a lot of exclusive stuff that you want to check out. You can check that out on Locals, or you can check it out right here on YouTube as well. And make sure you leave your comments below on what you think about this. Where do you agree? Where do you not agree? And make sure you like and subscribe and share this with your friends. I'm getting lots of people reaching out to me saying, hey, I saw this. So make sure you're sharing it with more people. And thank you so much for being a part of everything we're doing here. And go ahead.
One last thing I want to say. If y'all missed yesterday's episode where Doug delivered a kind of an alternate theory to the Iran war, very, very fascinating stuff. Super, super interesting. I loved his take on it, and like the evidence he showed and everything. Super, super interesting. And I'll just tell you, it has to do with Bitcoin. So super cool. Anyways,
that would be where
it's worth watching. So
yes, and that would be where I got the reference to worth their weight in Bitcoin. So go ahead and check that out, everybody. It was really a fascinating episode, so I would highly recommend that as well. So thank you everybody for joining. God bless, and we will see you tomorrow live on Filibusted Headlines.
Mm-hmm.